We're going to continue our coverage of Hulu's Washington Black, but y'all should watch our first part if you haven't. It follows George Washington Black's journey of escaping slavery, doing science experiments with his guardian Titch, and how George is falling for a mixed-race woman named Tanna. Tanna is unfortunately to be wed with Mr. McGee because she and her father are broke. After being on a pirate ship, George and Titch have finally reached Virginia. Titch promises to arrange a meeting with Mr. Edgar Farrow for the selling of molasses. Seeing how the boy is so affected by what happened to Barrington, Titch promises George that he'll never leave him. The two meet with Mr. Farrow, a scientist and a member of the RSL, who is also an abolitionist. Titch delivers the sad news of his father's death only to hear from Mr. Farrow that James Wilde is still very much alive. They have been exchanging letters for a few months now. So Titch's fatback brother Phil lied about their father's death. Angie catches Medwin cleaning John's dead body. Angie knows what happened, but they have both agreed not to tell the truth to anyone else and let John die a hero. Meanwhile, Tana learns that her father loved her mother dearly. That gives her enough courage for her upcoming meeting with Mr. McGee. Her father is overjoyed that Tana wants to discuss the wedding. But instead, Tana tells Mr. McGee that her mother was born in the Solomon Islands and that she herself is black. Mr. McGee wonders if she ran out of ink. Tana expects Mr. McGee to end the engagement after learning the truth. Instead, Mr. McGee appreciates the honesty, and he doesn't see anything wrong with Tana. He still wants to marry her, saying not being her true self must be difficult. Oh, I bet this man want to be in a lavender marriage. Tana delivers the news to George. While she was looking around, she found a book written by her father. It also happened to be George's favorite book. It's about marine animals, and he knows the book by heart. He got it from Titch. So Tana comes up with a new plan. She thinks that if George impresses her father with his intelligence, Mr. Goff might agree to their relationship. So the next day, George shows up. Because Mr. Goff thinks George is a smart guy, he asks him to join them. George takes the chance to talk about how much he loves the book. And when Tana fakes her arm injury, he even volunteers to die for specimens. However, Goff wonders if he could even swim, and luckily George doesn't fit the stereotype. It's his first time wearing a diving suit, so Mr. Goff reminds him to turn the valve to get oxygen into his suit. As soon as George dives, he's mesmerized. However, he almost loses consciousness when he runs out of oxygen. Luckily, an octopus distracts him, and he remembers to turn the valve on his suit. The octopus then wraps its tentacles around his arm. Mr. Goff is surprised when George comes up with the animal. He's excited to stuff it and study it, but George begs him not to kill the creature. So Mr. Goff challenges George to find a way to keep the octopus alive for research. The two are not aware that Mr. Goff has seen how they look at each other. The old man sends George away, telling him to start his project and not bother Tana. Once George leaves, Mr. Goff confronts his daughter. Based on what he witnessed earlier, he's sure that the two are in love. He tells Tana to forget about George because she will still be marrying Mr. McGee. Goff wants her daughter to be happy, but is more afraid of what the world would do to her being with a black man. Even though Mr. McGee knows that Tana doesn't want him, he has fallen in love. He tries convincing Tana that he is more than what he seems, but nothing he says can get her to change her mind. I wonder what he's hiding. Does he have a 10-incher? Suddenly, a foreign man named Nat Turner knocks on the door. He demands that Mr. Farrow help smuggle a child up north. The boy's name is Harrison, and Nat Turner killed the boy's master to save him. Because George could be mistaken for Harrison, Mr. Farrow orders everyone to hide and wait while he contacts his agent. George is afraid of Nat Turner at first, until he realizes that he's not that much different from his guardian kid. However, Nat hates Titch. Despite Titch saying that George is a free man and a friend, Nat accuses him of being a charlatan. He says Harrison is mute because his father was fed to the dogs and his mother sold to reproduce. They don't agree on the way in which freedom can be achieved. Nat chooses violence, and Titch thinks slavery can be abolished through peace. Nat almost hurts Titch, had George not stopped him. Titch is also in great distress, having realized that his father faked his death. George then advises him to travel to the Arctic to talk to his old man. Titch is surprised that George still wants to stick with him, but he welcomes the idea of a new adventure. Suddenly, Mr. Farrow's agent arrives, saying that bounty hunters are looking for George and Titch. Meanwhile, Mr. McGee participates in fistfight games during his free time, an image very far from who he is expected to be. No wonder he kept it a secret. No one talks about Fight Club. After a fight, Willard, who survived the gunshot that Medwin gave him, approaches Mr. McGee, looking for George Washington Black. He knows that George is a rival for Tana's heart, so George being dead will be a favor to them both. But Mr. McGee rejects the offer and doesn't even entertain the idea. 1 year ago, the man we know as Mr. McGee was called George Allister. The real Mr. McGee hired him to pretend to be him and get a business partner to sign some documents. The business partner was so stubborn, so that was Mr. McGee's last option. George Allister successfully finished the job and earned his money. However, he got offended when Mr. McGee says he's shocked Allister was able to act rich and noble when Allister is a broke Oz. So he stabbed the man to death before turning his attention to his own friend Patty. From that point forward, he assumed Mr. McGee's identity and sailed to Halifax, as the real Mr. McGee says he's on his way there to meet his bride-to-be. Now, a year later in Halifax, he's helping Tanna pick a wedding gown. However, her hair pushed up is giving me some pause. While somewhere in town, people are grieving John's death without knowing what really happened. Because of the rejection, Willard sends a letter to Mr. Goff telling him about Mr. McGee's fight club. So Mr. Goff heads to the fighting docks and is appalled when he finds out McGee is fighting senior citizens. He feels like he's been lied to. He confronts Mr. McGee, but McGee threatens to spill the beans about Tanna if they don't go through with the wedding. Meanwhile, Mr. Farrow is surprised to hear that Titch and George are being hunted down for murder. Still, he promises to help them. He sends them to look for Captain Holloway, a man who will help them sail to the Arctic. But the bounty hunters are looking for them. Having run out of places to hide, George jumps into the water. Titch follows soon after, knowing that the boy can't swim. From where he is hiding, George sees Willard's ugly and boogery nose. Luckily, Willard leaves right away. Titch then swims for the two of them until they reach Captain Holloway's boat. When they arrive at the Arctic, Titch asks Monsieur Lapin to take him to the RSL post. But no one wants to venture deeper north because there is a storm coming. So Titch just buys the map, and he and George continue on their way. They have already walked far when Titch slips and hurts himself. Back in the present, George does his best to build an aquarium for the octopus. However, as soon as he's done, Willard captures him. Tanna is unaware of what's happening to George because Mayonnaise Mary is busy courting her. Despite giving him the attitude, nothing seems to repel the man's attraction. He even gifts Tanna a brand new piano. Mr. McGee then shares that Willard approached him to help get rid of George. He brags about rejecting the bounty hunter, but Tanna is already thinking about how he can save George. Medwin has also realized that George is missing. As soon as Tanna delivers the news that it was Willard who took George, they look for him as soon as possible. When George wakes up, he's all tied, but manages to free himself and roll out of the cart. He runs for his life, but crusty Willard is on his tail. Tanna and Medwin follow George's tracks into the woods. The chase is brutal, and George even creates a simple trap for Willard to fall into. Thinking he's cornered, Willard walks over but falls on some spikes. George even throws down a tree onto Willard's ugly face. But no matter what he does, Willard never gives up. He's covered in blood and in so much pain, but manages to tackle George. George gets the upper hand and punches him. Eventually, Willard corners him at the edge of a cliff, and that is when George grabs the hunter and free falls into the water. Willard looking like Palpatine as he falls. Then George sees his younger self. The boy encourages him to dream once again and to never stop trying. When he opens his eyes again, he is about to drown. But George swims one more time to save himself. Medwin thinks that George would have instantly died at that height, but Tanna is hopeful. They first find Willard's dead body, already smelling like spoiled milk, before they stumble into George. Tanna starts to cry when she hears his heart beating. Angie is relieved to know that George is safe, but she's furious that, once again, Medwin has gotten himself in trouble. They feel something for each other, and Angie is over here thinking, "It's hard!" But Medwin always pulls away before he hears what Angie has to say. When Tanna arrives home, Mr. McGee is still there, waiting for her to come back. She thanks Mr. McGee for the information. It's because of him that they found out that Willard was still alive. Tanna has realized that Mr. McGee is not as bad as she expected him to be. She admits that had she not fallen in love with George, she would have married McGee. Even though the truth hurts him, Mr. McGee finally understands that Tanna will never love him as long as George is alive. Back in the past, George carries his friend into a cave. There is no one to help him, and soon enough, Titch closes his eyes. George begins to pray for him, assuming that he's dead. Then a man walks into a cave wearing full snow gear and carrying some equipment. He helps warm Titch's body until he regains consciousness. This man is James Wilde, Titch's zaddy. George and Titch are taken to the RSL post where James Wilde is studying the Northern Lights. Living in a literal igloo, Titch is happy to see his father until he sees Peter Haas, his father's lover. Oh, he's a fudge packer. This is a pill he can't swallow, but I'm sure Peter's good at swallowing. Titch can't handle the fact his father loves to give Peter Eskimo kisses. Peter is also a signer. He's very good with his hands. George is treated kindly by Uki and Pana, who are there helping James with the research. Since the food is not enough, they will hunt for seals the next day. Titch is visibly distracted, but he doesn't know how to explain fudge packing to George. The next day, Titch sits beside his father, waiting for a seal to catch. Titch wonders if Mother ever knew about the orphanage James loved to swallow. James says she understood the arrangement. Titch gets scolded nonstop for the simplest things, while George on the other side is enjoying himself. Even when Titch mentions the cloud cutter successfully flying, James Wilde doesn't seem to be impressed. Then a seal appears. Peter Haas fails to hit it with his arrow, so Titch tries taking a shot. Despite his father trying to stop him, Titch refuses to listen, and he accidentally hits Peter. Lucky for Peter, he will still be able to get on his knees. Titch keeps apologizing, but his father only sees him as a disappointment. James Wilde believes that Titch keeps tempting death, and he almost always gets everyone else in trouble. Then the old man takes out a document. It's Titch's application for the RSL. The league was ready to accept him, but his father refused to sign it. He says that Titch is not a scientist. This hurts Titch's ego a lot, but George is too busy to even notice. Tanna and Uki lost their daughter, but they are confident that she is somewhere in the skies. They promise to honor Kit, knowing how important she is to George, saying she will always be in the sky. The next day, George wakes up to find Titch leaving a letter for him. Titch has left him some money and a letter relinquishing any ownership over him. Titch wants to travel alone, and so he is leaving George behind. The boy doesn't want to let go. He follows Titch outside, begging him not to leave because he is the only family he has. But Titch has made up his mind. He keeps walking and doesn't look back until the snow fully covers his tracks. George screams at the top of his lungs about how much he hates Titch. When he turns around, the igloo is no longer in sight, and he has lost his way back. That's the end of the episode. Titch has annoyed me because he used George for his father's approval, up until he realized he was never getting it. He acts like an abolitionist, but abandoned that poor boy. What did you guys think of this one? There's one more part that we can cover. Should we cover it?
Hey, if you like this video, make sure you subscribe now and turn on the notification because YouTube isn't recommending my videos. And if you'd like to watch more foolishness, click here or here.